You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In this episode, we're going to have the CEO of Wicomico County Habitat for Humanity, Molly Hillegas, on to talk about the affordable housing, some of the challenges that she sees for both the aging population and the younger generations to get into housing. But before that, joining me in the studio is Dr. Venosa. Thanks for coming out, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
So, what an interesting week in the local politics in Wicomico County, and really didn't kind of see this coming.
Yeah.
I think one thing we should talk about is at the CIP meeting last Wednesday, or 2 Wednesdays ago, really. We did have an interesting interaction where our delegate, Barry Beecham, got up and talked about the revenue cap and whether or not people want to pay more taxes. I think it's just interesting that, you know, if you don't pay attention, you may not know what your government's doing, right?
Yeah, and especially because when it's sort of announced in such a sort of shorthanded way, like it was sort of a throwaway. It seems to me that you could look at it as a throwaway line, and yet it's not because it's such an important, huge issue.
I mean, so many people there raised their hand, and I was thinking, do they really know they're raising their hand to raise their taxes? And
Yeah.
But you know, speaking of spending money, especially money that's not planned, you know, at the last county council meeting on Tuesday, you and I reviewed the hearings that were coming up, and it didn't seem like a whole lot that was of major, you know, interest. But then as we got into the work session, a lot came up. It's starting with the Civic Center, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you were there for the hearing. So basically, the Civic Center is due for a renovation. There's over $5 million coming from an EDA loan from the federal government, or grant, I should say, not a loan. Yeah. But their initial budget was like 6.9 million, and the lowest bid so far is in the 9.5, 9.6 range.
Yeah, thereabouts.
So almost $3 million short, and they're not able to cover the last $2 million. What do you think about this? I mean.
Well, it's interesting because again, we understand that when, you know, entities, whether it's counties or municipalities, are doing these projects with grant funding, you're going to have cost overruns. You're going to have numbers that don't necessarily appear as they initially are sort of framed as. What's interesting though is that and again, this was discussed at the meeting, but apparently the finance department knew of this back in early October. So it was October 11th where they were made aware that it would be much higher. No discussion, no public notice, no transparency, it would seem, from the executive office to the council until much later.
Yeah, Councilman Holloway actually brought up feeling like, you know, once again, we're pinned in a corner. We have to make a decision right now.
This is, I think, the real broader concern beyond this project is that we have a budget, right, supposedly for a reason, in the sense of we set the budget so we know what we have to spend and what our priorities are. But then we have this sort of like this rolling admissions process for spending where, you know, every few months we have to move money out of, you know, contingency or from the general fund to fulfill these other things. And they're done in a way where, at least I think from our perspective, is, you know, it sort of pins you in a corner and says, well, we have to do it now. Otherwise, we're going to lose out on this grant funding or on something else. And if we wait any longer, it's going to cost even more money.
Well, and you know, talk about the CIP. I mean, the capital improvement plan should allow for more robust knowledge of what the funding priorities are on the capital side, what cost overruns could happen, and yet we don't see that.
No.
And the Civic Center in itself is not the end of the world, but at the same time, this is really the third or fourth example just since this budget was approved.
Correct.
In the spring. I mean, the fiscal year for the county just started July 1st.
Right.
The budget season just ended 6 months ago.
And as you said at the meeting during your public comments, and other people have also stated, you know, we're looking down the barrel of a really frightening fiscal outlook.
With the state.
Well, the state with the federal government. I mean, and again, I think people need to understand this too, regardless of where your politics are. There's a very open discussion about massive layoffs of federal workers. Now, you may not care about that in Wicomico County, but as a Maryland taxpayer, you really should be worried about that because we have a huge federal workforce. If we see those kinds of cuts, that means our payroll taxes dramatically drop off. That's going to also affect the budget beyond just this coming year. So when you tack on federal policy, the general economic climate, the state budget, at this point, which kind of like the city of Salisbury, it seems that we just run at a structural deficit. It's sort of designed to be that way. We're looking at some really unpleasant numbers that I don't think people are actually really considering when we have these discussions about, well, let's just take $2 million from the reserves now. Let's take $3 million here. Let's take however much money.
390,000 just for the library.
Hey, what's
just for rendering.
What's 390,000 between friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the last time we really saw some of the deficits, like you're seeing at the state level, the city level, was 2007, 2008.
Right.
And there was a lot of hard decisions that had to be made. And the one thing that the county has in its advantage right now is a strong reserve fund. How important is this going to be if there's unfunded mandates rolling down from the state?
Well, that's the thing. Your very robust reserve fund is only as robust as what you're willing to put it toward. Meaning, we could have a lot, which we do, but if we're throwing it into things on an ad hoc basis, then when those other issues come down, like, for example, the blueprint, which is going to cost money. And again, that wasn't a surprise. I mean, the expectation was that counties are going to have to pony up more funding, but it seems like we've never really reconciled with that reality.
Well, we'll take it another step further. If you go back to 2008, the state put on the county funding 50% of the retirement for the teachers. Mm-hmm. But what if the blueprint comes back and requires more teachers, but also at the same time the state takes even more of the funding percentage away from the retirement?
Right.
You're talking about adding expense on an expense on an expense.
Well, and you've forgotten one other tidbit that we kind of heard and have talked about too. Our disparity grant.
Oh, it's almost definitely coming
Councilman
away.
Hastings intimated that probably half of it will be cut. And of course, to the viewers at home, let's remember, our county executive, the Greater Salisbury Committee, the Chamber of Commerce, and the council, right, all more or less achieved a consensus on the liquor dispensary reforms, which have also defunded us to a tune of about $1 million a year. So we're facing state cuts, we're facing a structural problem, we're also facing, at this point, elements of the county government that are defunding its own budget while all of these other priorities are needed. I don't think this is a really good fiscal approach.
We are teetering on the potential to have a financial disaster there in the future, but the decisions are being made now.
Right.
And one of those other ones is sunsetting the Horizon Fund for the county. The city would have to decide on its own. But also, this still does leave the tax credit for the Ross building and Mentis and Nick Simpson still in limbo. But it seems like it's starting to round into a final decision that will lend towards giving them the property tax credit.
They'll get their money, I think, is I think what a lot of us saw at that last work session.
At the work session where they talked about the Horizon Fund, Councilwoman Shaney Shields brought up that her feelings have probably changed. She has said that she's received a phone call from former Mayor Jake Day. That would almost likely be putting some pressure on her to do this.
Sure.
But it sounds like she's going to change her vote to give the property tax credit. And we're talking $1.5 million over 10 years, right?
Right, yeah. Which means, of course, again, money that theoretically we would have in our budget or in our reserves or in a county entity for other things is now going away under the hope that what we give them will somehow foster a kind of economic development that we don't know will happen.
And then we have these other two, like you said, structural deficits that we need to talk about. One is the state of Maryland's come out and said that they're not going to have their share of the money for Fruitland Primary. Mm-hmm. We've already gone the bond.
Right.
We're building the school.
Yeah, and yet amazingly, Chrisfield was funded
fully for a building that's almost $40 million.
Right, which begs the question, and then this is an honest question, but one of the whole discussions during the campaign about why we should keep or get rid of a county executive was that a county executive would have the ear of the governor and would have access and clout to sort of help for the interests of the county. Well, Somerset County doesn't have a county executive, and they managed to get their funding for their schools
Fully funded.
fully funded. And,
Yeah.
and here we're told that Fruitland now won't be funded. So either the governor perhaps might not, think so well of our own executive system, or perhaps the system that we have just doesn't actually get the advantages that some people have argued. And that decision has been made, obviously. The election's over, but now we have to live with the consequences.
Well, and one of the other consequences too is we have not actually come up with a system to verify what we should do with the fire agreement, the fire service agreement for the city and for the county. And yet we've put a lot of time and effort into this. If we're not careful, we're going to find ourselves in a position where we've written way more checks than we can cash, right?
I would argue we're already there. I think the only thing that hasn't happened is those cuts and those scenarios haven't quite hit us yet. But I think they're boiling.
We have time to act, but the time is now, right?
Correct.
We need folks to get more involved, to come to the county council meetings, the city council.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
well, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to have CEO of Wicomico County Habitat for Humanity, Molly Hilligoss, on. I want to get her perspective of what is affordable housing, what are some of the other challenges she's seen in the community, but also what kind of leadership and what kind of planning is she looking for so that we have a better future in the next 5 or 10 years.
Great.
So stay with us. We'll be right back with Molly Hilligoss. Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me is Molly Hilligoss. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
So you're the CEO of Habitat for Humanity for Wicomico County, is that correct?
That's correct.
How long have you been doing this?
I'm about to have my 10th year anniversary. So February marks 10 years and I've never been happier. So it's like a dream come true to just like wake up every morning and serve others. I love it and make a difference.
Well, congratulations on coming up on the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, thank you.
So could you explain to me just a little bit about what Habitat for Humanity's role is in Wicomico County and some of the challenges you see our communities facing now?
Sure. So historically, people know of us as a builder that uses volunteers to help low-income families become first-time homebuyers. And that has been a big part of what we do, obviously. We've helped 91 families
Oh, wow.
since 1987, and we've transformed lives, like without a doubt. The other part of what we do, which has really grown, and I will pat myself and my team on the back for this. We have really steamrolled into doing critical home repairs
Okay.
for older adults. It's important as as we age, we need home modifications like a walk-in shower or grab bars or even kitchen remodels to bring the appliances down. People that as you age, your abilities change.
So in one way, you're helping people get in a home, and some other ways you're maybe helping them stay in their home, right?
Without a doubt.
Wow.
And so we've helped 126 families just since 2013
Okay.
to age in place.
So this is obviously an initiative that you and your team have really pushed forward in the last 10 years.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, it was. We started getting these calls like, hey, in some points it was Chesapeake Housing Mission saying, hey, we'll do the ramp, but this family needs a new roof, or they need a walk-in shower. They need things that we don't do. And when we started reaching out to Wicomico County has a planning and zoning department, and they just didn't have the resources. The state of Maryland has a special loans program for critical home repairs,
Okay.
but it's grossly underfunded. And so we just kept running into roadblocks. And then as we would try to help people get connected to those resources, then there were even more roadblocks to families to get access. And so
Now, do you spend time trying to help families apply for those loans, or do you like, you know what, it's just easier if we we do it this way and stay in our own organization?
So it's yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
The first thing we do is we figure out, does this family qualify for, which programs do we think that they might qualify for? That might be based on their income, if they're a veteran, if the property is outside of the city limits, but it's also in a rural area. So there's a program called USDA, and they have a 504 loan and grant program.
Okay.
So if the family lives in that area
Okay.
and they own the home and the property has insurance, and that's just the beginning. So like if the property's in a flood zone and they don't have flood insurance, then they don't qualify. It's like all these knockout factors
Okay.
for families. So what we did was we said, okay, what can we do to connect them to the existing resources first? If that doesn't work, then we need more flexible financing to offer them. And so we started raising money and applying for grants. And we're in this year, I think it's our 5th year of receiving the Rural Maryland Council RIMPIF funding. We've used it for different things. We've used it for workforce development, but we've used it for aging in place modifications. We leverage resources with other entities like Tidal Health. Johns Hopkins is partnering with us now. So we cobble together all these resources to try to help the families.
Well, sometimes at county council meetings, I've heard them bring up resolutions to move funds into different grant programs that are, I guess, designed for helping folks make repairs, critical repairs. Is that a program? Are those types of programs what you're part of?
So it depends. The community development block grant, that typically is about $700,000 every 2 years that flows from HUD to the state and then to the county, and the county administers that money. They've earmarked that funding over the years for either down payment assistance through Salisbury Neighborhood Housing or through their own home repair program. They can only serve about 25 families a year with that funding. Our waiting list right now is 140 families.
Oh, wow.
So like if somehow somebody could stroke a check for $2.4 million, we could probably put a new roof on all those families' homes.
So if folks have more questions, like they think maybe their parent who's maybe getting older would qualify, how would they reach your organization? What's the best way?
I would encourage them to first start at our website and just learn a little bit more. And that's wycomicohabitat.org.
Okay.
The second would be to call our office, 410-546-1551. And our intake coordinator will take all their information and connect them immediately to one of our processors.
So being a part of this process, someone with your area of expertise, what do you think are some of the bigger challenges that we face as a community for the next 5 or 10 years if we're making a plan?
So right now, like what we're seeing, some of the biggest challenges are we're about to offer a loan to a family. Usually it's anywhere from between 10 and 20,000, and then all of a sudden their septic goes out.
Okay.
And we don't have those kind of funds.
Okay, because you're talking 20 or 30,000.
40,000.
Yeah.
Like we had one client where we worked with the health department and he ended up getting a new drain field and septic and all that. It was 40,000.
Wow.
So we were lucky that we had a donor who said, I have all this money. I only want it to go to Vietnam veterans that need home repairs. And we were like, okay, we've got plenty of those. I mean, we literally have like 50 some families that are veterans. So it was a matter of, were you giving them a call? Were you in the Vietnam War? Can you send over that DD-214? I need to verify that you were served in the Vietnam War. And then, oh, hey, guess what? We have some money that we can help you.
Well, they were very lucky to have someone like you who could cut through, maybe not even red tape, but those types of hurdles that you need to check all those boxes off.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So I've had my mortgage license since Hurricane Katrina. It was like, 2005? So I've been helping families get back into houses or become homeowners for a very long time. I took a hiatus in between living in Mississippi to moving back here. and did a couple other things, owned my own business, and so I have a different. My background is so well suited to running this operation and growing it.
You have a unique perspective and a set of expertises that I think maybe would.
Absolutely. I did VA loans. I did FHA loans. I did USDA loans. I did no doc loans back in the day. I saw everything, and I was a part of, all the transitions with mortgage regulation and making sure that the loans that are offered are the right loans for families that they can afford.
Well, I wanted to also spend some time in another segment, if you'd stick around, talking about one of the rhetorical questions that's come up is, what is affordable housing in this area? We also have a planning and zoning meeting actually scheduled for later today, which is a combination of the City of Salisbury and the Wicomico County, to talk about density down in the downtown. If you'd stick around, I'd like to just talk about how you feel like some of those policies play into what becomes affordable housing.
Absolutely.
So stay with us for another segment as we ask some more questions with CEO Molly Hillegas from the Habitat for Humanity, just about the planning and zoning meeting, density, and affordable housing in Wicomico County. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. Sticking around for another segment is Molly Hillegas from Wicomico County Habitat for Humanity.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for spending some time talking about.
I have a lot to say. So invite me back anytime.
Most certainly. I could already tell that's going to be a good idea. So we have a planning and zoning meeting later today, and it's a combination of City of Salisbury and Wicomico County. It's probably the one area where the two entities really kind of cross.
Yeah, you know what? What's really interesting, you may not realize this, so with Habitat, we've been building houses, but we haven't built like a whole subdivision in a very long time. So I haven't had to interact with planning and zoning. We just, work with the architect, we get the plans done, we go to the city, we get the permits, yada, yada, we build the house, it's inspected, it meets all of the code. But now that I'm getting more involved in advocacy, I'm learning more about how the whole process works.
Yep.
And the fact that we don't have enough affordable housing here. I mean, it's not just affordable for low to moderate income families, because what most people don't realize is that we're like the next family that we're serving with home ownership, she works at the health department.
Okay.
I mean, these are
professionals.
These are professionals.
Yeah.
They just happen to have large families and they meet the income limits, but they have to pay their rent on time, and we have to have proof that they've paid their rent on time, no lates, for the last 2 years, have workable credit, the ability to save at least $2,400, have at least $1,000 in the bank at settlement. I mean, these are legitimate loans that they're paying back. Nope, there's no handout here.
No, and actually they have to do a lot of the work.
They have to do a lot of the work.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest problems, I mean, we have, oh my gosh, any given year, probably 150 people applying to become homeowners. And we only have like 5 homes that we're going to sell.
Yeah. So, I mean, let me ask you a question. If someone does qualify, and obviously there's a lot to that, but what would the expectation, what's a normal mortgage payment a month that someone like that is going to have? I mean, a range, not specific.
So it really depends on their income. So it would be no more than 30% of their gross income before taxes, gross monthly. So you figure.
And that's pretty normal even for a bank too, right? In a way. Because a bank, I mean, if you go get a bank loan, they're going to want your debt to income ratio to be maybe not as, maybe 32 or 33, but they're looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
Correct?
We like our top ratio, so the housing ratio, to be between 25 and 30%, no more than 30%. And then the back ratio, which is total debt to income, no more than 41%.
Okay.
So the biggest problem that we have when people apply is that 11%, right, between your housing and your debt to income is not a lot of money.
No.
So, and when people can go, they get a car loan. What's the average car loan these days? Like, it's like, I'll tell you, it's like $700, $800 a month,
Yeah, which is significant.
which that kicks them out. They're no longer eligible to become a homeowner anywhere.
Well,
Like, it's not just us. It's even with lenders.
Well, one of the arguments that's being made to increase the density downtown is for affordable housing, but historically we're looking at apartments that are between $2,000, $2,400, or even more, $2,800.
Right.
Is that in the same
Yeah.
same
So
breath as what is affordable housing?
that what they're proposing to build downtown, they're calling it luxury. Based on what I'm seeing, it's really market rate.
Okay.
What ends up happening, the more supply that's built, then those that do have the ability to move up to better amenities, more access to, restaurants and, whatnot. I mean, when you have the ability to pay more for what you want, you're going to move there.
Okay.
So that's going to open up properties that,
They moved out of.
Yeah, that
Okay.
they moved out of, that are older, that, may not be as energy efficient. Here's a good example. So we just renovated our new offices in Fruitland, right? 8,000 square foot. Half is our office, the other half is a second restore. When we bought that building a couple years ago, the monthly utilities were running about $4,000 to $5,000,
Okay.
right? For electric
Yeah.
only.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
We totally
money.
rehabbed that building. I just wrote a check to Delmarva Power for $535
Okay.
for last month. That's energy efficiency. That's
Okay.
what happens when you renovate and you are building to code, and it's the building is tight, and your money's not like flying out the cracks of the building.
But you would also, I mean, you're in obviously supply and demand can really drive the market, and
Right.
if we're able to build responsibly new apartments somewhere in the area, it would allow for there to be more supply. But you are
Yes.
talking about some lower income families moving into less efficient apartments. That is going to take some of their finance and tie that up. But I'm also curious too, like as
But
much as
we've also got an overcrowding situation right now. So the Board of Ed, Dr. Micah Stauffer shared with me that 1 out of every 10 students is housing insecure. They're called FIT, Families in Transition, but they don't have a permanent address.
okay.
So we already have overcrowding situation happening.
So if the density is increased, and we build more houses, which would help on the supply side, but we don't have some of the other resources, infrastructure. It could be parking. That's been a popular hot button, but it also could be schools. Do we run the risk of maybe having some other issues if we haven't considered the plan holistically?
I think that this is a very difficult topic. Housing, though, shouldn't be politicized because people need housing, no matter what income bracket you're in. If you're looking to buy a house for you and your family, or you have a young family, and you can't find what you're looking for, that's a problem.
Yeah.
We need more supply. So I have sat on at least 4 different housing task forces in the last 6 months between Rural Maryland Council, the City of Salisbury had it wasn't a task force, it was more of like a housing action committee, Greater Salisbury Committee, and NAACP asked me to be on their housing task force. I mean, so the issue is it should not be politicized. It's about how do we build more supply of the new, and how do we preserve what we have?
So what would you say to folks out there watching who aren't political, just like you said, maybe this should not be politicized, but they want to see an action plan. How do you think they should become involved in order to make sure that the next generation has housing to buy and also the older generation has housing to live in?
I mean, they can get involved. They can get involved whether it's the NAACP, whether it's Salisbury University has surveys and programs through the PACE organization. They can get involved at Habitat on our family selection committee. They can learn more that way. They can go to county council, city council meetings. They could go onto the city website and read the impediments to fair housing choice document that the city paid for.
And when did that come out?
outlines, that came out over a year ago.
Okay.
And so it outlines the shortage of housing. It outlines how many, it created a strategic plan of what the city should be doing to address the housing issues.
Okay.
And so my question, and I've asked this to the city, is, okay, you've got this plan, you paid consultants to create this. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, what do you see as most important? I know what I see as most important, and I already met with the mayor when he was first elected. I think I met with him maybe in January, February, and I said the preservation of existing homes is so important for us to keep the housing stock we have, and I was urging him to create, a pot of money that we could make that happen together with Salisbury Neighborhood Housing, because they also have a program. And that hasn't happened. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet, but I'm hopeful.
Okay.
And there are other strategic initiatives in that plan. It's like I said, the impediments to fair housing choice. There's also another document that the city paid for that they're required to produce. It's a comprehensive action plan that's all related to housing. I mean, this is like a 300-page document.
Okay.
And
That's a lot to read.
it is a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot, but it's such a large continuum, whether, from folks that are homeless, to folks that are older and want to downsize and want to sell that big house in Nitsdale, but they have no place to go.
Well, one of the things we're hoping with our show, and maybe you would come back and be a part of this with us, because I know you have lots more you'd love to talk about. But let's see how the planning and zoning meeting goes, and let's give them a few months, and then would you check back in with us, and let's just really see, is there some action to the action plan? Is there some strategic motivation to the strategic plan?
Yes.
Rather than just producing documents with no action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then the other thing that kind of just like, I just scratch my head about this is the, especially with the density of the text amendment, is that for decades, community leaders have been trying to make positive changes downtown. And finally, there's a developer willing to invest. And now all of a sudden, like how is that possible? How's it possible that from 1965 to now, all these meetings, all these smart people saying, we need this, and now finally someone's got the money, and then they're like, oh, we changed our mind.
Okay.
It just doesn't.
Well,
I just would like to understand that, because I'm a city resident, and I would like to understand how that could happen.
Well, what I'm going to ask you is, will you come back in with us maybe shortly after the new year, and let's do a review of what was passed at the planning and zoning, and how has the county and city taken some of those steps since then, and let's keep people informed and also continue to encourage them to get involved themselves. Would you be willing to do that?
I would love that.
Great.
I would also love to hear you interview some other people about housing and hear what they have to say, and where they think there should be some focus.
Well, and we have interviewed like Shani Shields, councilwoman from District 1, and trying to find that leadership. You're talking about city council, county council, or county executive, and then community leaders like yourself. We're looking for, as a population, we need to be looking for some leadership, some direction, and maybe a that holistic plan that would cover both the supply, the infrastructure, the education part. So look forward to having you back on. Is that okay? All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back next week with another new episode.
I know what I'm doing, man.